This is some of the police radio transmissions from the 6th about the kind of security threats that existed.
There's an individual in a tree. He's going to be a white male, about 6 feet tall, thin build, brown cowboy boots. He's got blue jeans and a blue jean jacket, and underneath the blue jean jacket, the complainants both saw a stock of an AR-15. He's going to be with a group of individuals, about 5 to 8 other individuals. 2 of the individuals in that group at the base of the tree near the porta potties were wearing green fatigues, green olive drab style fatigues, about 5'8", 5'9", skinny white males, brown cowboy boots. They had Glock-style pistols in their waistband.
8736 with the message that subject weapon on his right hip. After that, he's in the tree.
So in the tree were Trump supporters, Michael Steele, with AR-15s, and then at the bottom of the tree near the porta pots, dressed in green fatigues and olive-colored fatigues, were Trump supporters with Glock-style pistols in their waistbands. Now, all weapons are illegal in D.C., but this was an event that was under the purview of the Department of Homeland Security. It's really important to know what they knew about what was happening in Washington, D.C. that day.
It absolutely is. There's no doubt about it. All up and down the chain, Nicole, that is the truth here. That's where the truth is, all up and down that chain, what people knew, when they knew it. I mean, because you got to go back in time a little bit, not the day of January 6th. You got to go back to the week before. These events like this just don't happen in Washington. I grew up here in this town. I know exactly. You just don't show up on the Hill, 100,000 people and nobody knows about it, right? So the reality of it is there was some planning. There had to have been some level of planning. What was the crosstalk between the agencies? What was not told to D.C. police? What was not told to the Capitol Hill police? What was told to them? And I think you will begin to see exactly how this nefarious event materialized in the way that it did, so that you had that kind of chatter among the officers who probably were themselves, I can't believe there's somebody up in the tree with a Glock. how does that even happen? How does that happen?
The guy in the
Capitol Hill
tree with the AR. Yeah. I mean, there's that.
Yes.
Yeah. The Glocks were by the porta pots. I just want to be accurate in my armed Trump supporter descriptions.
Absolutely.
Because we didn't get there yet, I just want to put this out there. I don't know that the committee has sought any communications or texts from Mr. Ratcliffe, but here's what Cassidy Hutchinson told us his concerns were heading into January 6th.
My understanding was Director Ratcliffe didn't want much to do with the post-election period. Director Ratcliffe felt that it wasn't something that the White House should be pursuing. He was concerned that it could spiral out of control and potentially be dangerous, either for our democracy or the way that things were going for the 6th. Pretty much the way that the White House is handling the post-election period, he felt that there could be dangerous repercussions in terms of precedent set for elections, for our democracy, for the 6th. He was hoping that we would concede.
So for me, Neil, the most interesting thing she says there is that Mr. Ratcliffe didn't want anything to do with the post-election period. For me, that pushes the national security concerns about Donald Trump's conduct back to November. Do you want to know what he was saying and writing and texting?
Heck yes. And so I think I think the committee's got to subpoena Director Ratcliffe and figure out what Cassidy Hutchinson's talking about here. And, more generally, I think I love Michael's point about going back from January 6th and looking at the record before, and the Director Ratcliffe stuff is part of it. But also, as we think about all the destruction of this evidence, it's worth going forward a week or two after January 6th, because a week after it, of course, we had the impeachment proceedings. Where was Director Ratcliffe in that? Nowhere. Where was Mark Meadows? Nowhere. Where was Pat Cipollone? Nowhere. And the list goes on. We could go down 20 more individuals, none of whom showed up. And when we ask ourselves about the missing evidence, the missing call logs, all these texts that are gone, it's important to remember these folks all knew within days of this investigation of an impeachment. And if they didn't want to come forward then, well, gosh darn it, you got to preserve your evidence and records for at some point when that evidence is going to be needed. The idea that they were silent then, and then all of a sudden, all this evidence got destroyed. So now the committee and the Congress and the American people can't find out about it. All of that stinks to high heaven. And so to me, this is looking really like a deliberate attempt, not just incompetence, but a deliberate attempt to hide the truth from the American people.
Neil, let me just ask you a technical question. I mean, this is a national security event, right? Like the Super Bowl or like any other national security event for which, and we know the result. There were guys with, according to the police traffic, AR-15s in the tree and Glocks in their belts by the porta pots. If this were anything else, wouldn't we have had a full vetting, a full after action, a full turning over of every piece of evidence of who knew that was going to happen and what they did when they found out about the threats?
100%. I mean, absolutely. And I can't say it better than my friend Michael earlier. I mean, there is a deliberate attempt on the part of one party right now to cover this up, not just in terms of destroying the evidence, but today to not get to the bottom of the truth. And to go and attack this committee instead, I'd have some sympathy if these people said, the 1-6 committee is, partisan or whatever. I mean, we know that's not true. But, if they also said, but we really want to get to the bottom of what happened. But they don't. It's just an attack on the committee and a bunch of bogus allegations, not coupled with any attempt to get at the truth. And you're right, if this were the Super Bowl, which, I mean, no offense to the Super Bowl, is not quite the national security or government event that the transfer of power on January 6th and the certification of the votes is, we'd know all of this. And so, the idea that right now one of our two major political parties is standing between the American people and the truth, I just, that's baffling to me.
Nicole? I mean, and I think the other variable is that the people were all Trump supporters. Go ahead, Michael. You get the last word.
No, I was just going to say on that point that Neil just made. Could you imagine if the president? I like the Super Bowl analogy. Put the president of the United States attending the Super Bowl. Do you really think that the Secret Service and everybody in government would allow 70, 80,000 people to come into the Super Bowl with weapons? No.
Right, or take down the mag, or the Super Bowl. I mean, the Super Bowl is good because take out the mags. We've got guys with AR-15s in the top stands. Take down the mags. They're not here to hurt me. I mean, part of what paralyzes all these conversations is where it happened. But I remember after 9/11, there were designated national security events, and the Super Bowl is just the first one I thought of. I don't mean to pick on football, but if the president's supporters had AR-15s in the stands and he said, "Take down the mags. They're not here to hurt me," we would have had congressional hearings the next day. And the notion that there's one of the two parties doesn't want to participate in said hearings, and the three agencies involved have lost all their records is fishy at best. Neil Katyal, Michael Steele, to be continued. Thank you both so much for starting us off this hour.